Hey, She Ace That listeners, find us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Every subscribe, like, and follow goes a long way, and I can't thank you all enough for your support. And with that, let's get into today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to She Said. It's your host Alexandra, and today we have Cassidy Lichtman joining us to share her incredible journey from playing on Team USA and having a standout career at Stanford to now the Director of Volleyball for Athletes Unlimited after her own professional volleyball career. Athletes Unlimited is a league that is unlike anything we've seen before in professional sports world, where the entire model is built around the athletes, which I'm really excited to share more about with you all today. So with that, Cassidy, welcome to She Ace That.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. So I do want to start with the AU volleyball structure and understand how Athletes Unlimited Volleyball is not the traditional sports model of like a city-based franchise with fixed teams and owners. Can you walk us through that structure from how teams are formed each week to how players actually earn points and win? And I'm just curious what drove the creation of how Athletes Unlimited operates.
Our founders, John Patrick and Jonathan Soros, back in, I think, 2018, I want to say, we're looking to get into women's sports. John was the president of NYCFC, the men's soccer team in New York, and felt like there was really real opportunity in women's sports, which was kind of before the big women's sports wave hit. So he was a little bit ahead of the curve. And initially they thought about buying a team in an existing league and then started thinking about kind of what if we built something from scratch? What would that look like? And some of it is built on kind of fan data that says that, this generation of fans coming up is really following individual athletes. So if you're, a LeBron James fan, like you're going to follow him from Cleveland to Miami to LA, et cetera. So that's part of the model. Also a little bit built on, the fact that in a lot of leagues, in all sports, there's a bunch of games that may or may not really matter that much. Kind of then you get to playoffs and like things like kind of really hit. So they wanted to find a way to have kind of a shortened season that has all the sort of competitive nature of a playoff tournament, and all of it kind of worked really in the model that we ended up with. We bring an entire roster of 44 athletes to one city at a time, and split them up into 4 teams each week. There's an individual leaderboard that counts points, similar to people who have played, fantasy sports. Our players are going to get points for every time their team wins a set or a match, their own kind of individual contributions on the court. So, if they get a kill, they get some points, errors, negative points, and then MVP votes. So every rally of every game, that leaderboard is shifting as people score points. So it's super exciting and really competitive. And then, every week the top 4 players on that leaderboard are the captains, and they get to draft their teams for the next week. So they get a lot of say kind of in how the team is run and the decisions that are made. But yeah, it's super fun. I think it's just like a different type of challenge for these athletes who have played kind of in the traditional leagues throughout their entire career. So yeah, it's been really, really fun to watch.
It's really cool, I think, especially at that level, like once you hit the professional leagues, to have the individual dynamics to it, because you're used to always being a team and winning as a team and, you win or lose together. But I think it's really cool to bring that in. Was there any pushback on that operating model when it was first discussed?
I think initially the thought was, is this going to individualize the game? This is obviously a team sport. I think volleyball in many ways is the ultimate team sport. And it's been super interesting to see kind of how that actually plays out. They find out really quickly that the best way to earn points is team wins. Winning any set, winning any match is really important. So I think that kind of keeps it together. And then the other thing we found that's I don't know if we fully anticipated was because this whole group of 44 is shifting around each week, they're all opponents technically on this leaderboard, but they're also potentially all teammates. And it's this really cool culture that has developed out of that where, it's incredibly competitive. They absolutely, are cutthroat on the court and want to win really badly, but also like really love each other and are having a great time. And to me, that makes them play better, like that they're having fun, that they're kind of finding the joy of the game a lot of the time, for many of them who've come through, really kind of stressful careers and to some extent playing at the highest level where you always have a coach that's kind of on top of you. And in this model, you're a little more free to kind of just get out and play. And we see some really great performances, I think, because of that.
As a player, what was it like knowing you'd have a completely different teammate every single week, and did that change how people approach their leadership or communication on the court?
Yeah, I thought it was super fun. I mean, I think the team has to gel so quickly, and I'm always so impressed with, you go out and watch a team that's in a traditional league. They could be together for, a month, 2, 3, 4 months, and you'll have teams in our league that have been together for 2 days, and it looks more fluid and more clean than some of those teams who've been together for a long time. And that's part of I was talking to Jordan Thomas about this other day, just the drafting process, and this is her first time at AU, and she's like, it's so cool to kind of put that team together and figure out kind of what you need and what's important to you and what's going to work together. Because we've had teams in the past that, like, on paper look amazing and they don't work, and we've had teams that don't look amazing on paper and it gels and it works out. So I think as we've gone on, it's been interesting to see kind of which teams can figure it out quickly and the ones that can adapt and be great teammates and figure each other out, within a day or two, are the ones who start off the weekend really strong.
It's really cool to see that it might not always be the most stacked team, and you still can find ways to win and work together. And it's really like the team dynamic on the court that matters more than always the individual skill sets. Can players have equity in the league? Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so it's called private participation. And what we have is it's something similar to ownership. So the athletes all get units in this kind of pool for based on every kind of game that they play in the league. And this goes across our other sports too. And so then as the value of the company grows over time, I guess the way that I would explain it is, if you play for Angel City, they sold, the soccer team, they sold last year for, I don't know, $100 million or something crazy. The athletes aren't going to see any of that money, right? Even though the valuation of the team went from this to this. And then they sell and the owner gets that entire kind of profit. In our model, if the valuation of the company goes up, then the athletes are going to get part of that profit off of the top. So all of our investors agree to essentially cap their returns. So they may cap it at 10%, 15%, whatever it is. So they're only looking to get that much back. And then anything on top of that goes into a pool that goes to the mission of the company and the athletes in kind of 50% increments. So, and that is true for 20 years after you play. A big kind of part of it was thinking about, like, Jonathan, one of our founders, he calls it the Billie Jean King problem, where she agreed to sign for $1 on the first kind of women's tennis tour. And then, years and years later, Serena Williams is making millions, right? But Billie Jean King isn't necessarily going to see that money. And so it's really about the athletes that are coming in at this point when, the league is just starting out. You want to see them profit off of the growth of it that they're kind of inciting. So, 15 years from now, if the league has grown in value and the organization across all of our sports has grown in value, then our athletes are going to see proceeds from that in the same way that an owner would if you sold a team.
It's really cool because they're investing their time and their skills, really beneficial. Players and fans can vote for an MVP after every match. So how does that peer voting work when you're competing against each other for individual points? And does that create tension, or does it actually build kind of a more respect factor among the athletes?
Yeah, we haven't seen too much scheming. They're pretty good about voting, I think, for the right people. But yeah, you vote. You can vote for anybody. You can vote for yourself. You can vote for your teammates, the opposing team. But I think generally speaking, like, I usually kind of check the stats and look at what's being voted on. And I think generally speaking, they make the right choices. We have seen it a little bit. I think our other sports are, honestly, they scheme a little bit more. But
That's
the
funny.
volleyball players have seemed to, like, have respect for a good performance and vote for the right people. And sometimes it depends. An MVP it's not necessarily the person that got the most kills or scored the most points. Often they're in the mix somewhere, but sometimes it's somebody who came in and had a game changing performance or something like that. But yeah, I think they do a pretty good job.
Well, that's really cool. Can you walk me through what a typical week looks like from draft day to game day? How many matches are played per week, and how quickly can someone's standings change?
Yeah. So we draft. So say we draft on Monday, which I think is the schedule we're on right now. We draft Monday. We'll usually practice 2 days before the first game day, which is crazy, right? It's super fast. But we'll practice for 2 days. Usually the first practice is kind of like getting in a rhythm. You might have a new setter, figuring that out. The second practice, they'll do a little bit more of that kind of serve and pass, and then we overlap them so they can scrimmage a little bit with one of the other teams, play a little sixes, and then we have our first game day. And so that's the first chance that they have to kind of move up on the leaderboard. Then we'll have one more practice day. That's usually pretty light. That's like today. They'll come in mostly serve and pass. Maybe people who didn't play as much are going to jump more. And then they'll have 2 more game days. So they play all three other teams throughout the weekend in kind of a round robin. And yeah, you'll see people jump. I mean, again, especially on a winning team, you'll see people jump up the leaderboard really, really fast sometimes. And I think what's great about it is in a traditional league structure, you're on the top team, you're on the bottom team, like you're likely to kind of stay on that trajectory. And what happens here is if you have a great team, like our first weekend, we had a team that was, incredible. And they, I think, won all 3 matches that weekend. And then all of those players become captains because they drive up the leaderboard so far. And so then that team gets split up and it evens out kind of the field again. And the same thing for if you're on the worst, like if you're on the worst team in a 6-month league, like that is rough. You got to stay on it for that whole time. And not what you can do about it. Here, if you're on the worst team, it's like, okay, that's unfortunate, but it's going to change, 5 days from now. So, and you could all of a sudden
Yeah.
be on the best team and you'll see people make, 15, 17 like slot jumps on the leaderboard just based on kind of where their team was at that week. And then obviously if they have a kind of a big performance themselves.
Do you guys reset the points at any time during the season, or is it just stays until the very
No, it
end?
stays cumulative. So they're racking up points for the whole time.
With 44 elite players and like one per team, that means that some talented players obviously are going to be on the sidelines, maybe more than on the court. How do the teams manage the playing time decisions and keep everybody engaged throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's tough for any professional experience or elite sports in general. You're always going to
Yeah.
have people who play a little bit less. It's fun to see this year. I feel like we have some good depth, and so a lot of people are getting in. I think every year that's gotten a little bit better as we get kind of better players in that sort of borderline, starter non-starter position. We also try to make sure as we're recruiting that we just get people who are going to be great teammates and who understand, that there's a lot of great talent here and they may or may not kind of see the court all the time. And we talk about it a lot in the beginning of the season before we start drafting too, of like it can change at any given time. I've seen players who are on the bench, until the very last week of the season and then they get drafted and as a starter. And that's part of that kind of switching teams is, everybody who's on your current team is seeing you in practice. They're seeing the work that you're putting in. If you look good out there and then they're in the next draft like, hey, so and so has been great in practice, I think we should take a shot on her. So people have definitely been able to kind of get opportunities and take them, and I think we've seen a bit more of that this year as the depth has increased and more people get on the court.
It's so interesting. I love the idea behind it and the models. We'll get into a little bit more eventually, but I do want to go back to your Stanford experience and your playing time there, and balancing getting a BA and MIA in 4 years while winning 4 Pac-12 championships. Do you have any advice for current student athletes that may be juggling multiple degrees or even one on top of their full-time athlete role?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me in college was, it's so different transitioning from high school where you're like high school, I'm going to school for this amount of time in the day and then I have, practice and then I have my homework. Like it's very much kind of big blocks. And college was like, okay, I have a class here, then I have like an hour off and then another class and then like 30 minutes and then I got to go to the training room. And so we used to talk about like the awkward time gaps during the day. You're like, okay, what can I fit in this one awkward time gap? Can I do like the reading for this, or can I finish one problem set here or start it? And so I think that kind of level of time management and figuring out when you can fit stuff in is important. And then also like understanding kind of yourself as a student. Like I wasn't necessarily, the kind who's like, I'm gonna do my work right away and like have it all done and I super organized. Is like I procrastinated too. It's fine. But like you gotta know your limits and know like I never pulled an all-nighter. I knew kind of that I was gonna get it done by, the night before at the very latest. So I think knowing yourself and kind of setting those kind of schedules and boundaries around it. And especially I think what we did really well was in volleyball, you get into the end of the season and if your team's going to be in the tournament, if you're like worried about kind of postseason play, I think what we used to talk about a lot at Stanford was like front loading that and ensuring if I know I'm going to have this like take home essay, I'm going to do it before we, hit the road, even if it's, super early. I'm going to get that done and I'm going to give myself deadlines. So I know like I'm going to have my work done by the time the important games come along as much as I can.
I give you so much credit. Clearly, it all paid off.
Thanks.
And I know you were named the AVCA First Team All-American twice and an Academic All-American First Team in 2010. So can you explain how those are decided and how you qualify for being chosen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a committee that chooses. I actually don't know as much about the Academic All-American. There's a All-American committee that's made up of coaches, current college coaches who choose those awards for the All-Americans. It's funny. I was talking to one of them. I think it was last year or the year before. And, the fans now have like so many opinions about like, I remember like the Nebraska fans were really upset that like Lenny Boyd, like their DS didn't get an on the All American list. And it's like, all right, maybe like, so, but they are, this is not like a fan vote. Like this is volleyball people choosing it. That first year I got on, um, I think was more of the question. I was playing, like, I was setting and hitting, and I think they just kind of recognized that that was hard.
Yeah.
And put me on there, but that was really cool. I mean, I think just obviously like the conference championships and like getting to the Final Four, it was kind of my favorite part of the experience. But looking back afterwards and being able to say that you were named one of the top 12 players or whatever it is in the country it's the scope of that's pretty crazy.
That's amazing. And you returned to Stanford as an assistant coach in 2016 and helped them win a national championship that season. So what led you to that, and how did you come back for a full circle moment?
Yeah, it was funny. I was retiring from the national team in 2016, and I thought I was going to maybe go play one more season overseas. I'd been in China the season before. I thought I might go back, and John Dunning, my college coach, called me, and our assistant from my time there, he was leaving. Jay Mansfield, he's at Kansas State now. And John was like, "Hey, Jay's leaving. I have a spot open. I really like if you want it, I really want you to come back here and coach." And I honestly was like, "I don't think I want to do it." I kind of told him probably not, but I'll think about it. I wasn't necessarily looking to be a college coach, and but I was like, okay, but it's Stanford, and I love those people, obviously. And so I was like, let me think about it. And I ended up deciding it was a great kind of off ramp for me coming from playing. I didn't really know what I wanted to do next work wise. Figured that's kind of where my connections were, the people I knew in the Bay Area. And obviously I love the program. And so I called him back like a day or two later, and I was like, yeah, I want to do it. And he was kind of shocked because I basically told him no. Which was so funny because it's like, people would like cut their left arm off to go coach at Stanford. And I was like, I don't know. But I'm super glad I did it. I mean, and it ended up being his last season too. And that was part of what I told him. I was like, I don't know if I want to be a college coach. Like I might be there one season and leave. And he was like, it's okay. If you want to come for a season two, like we'll be happy to have you here. And so that made me more comfortable with it.
Speaking of the national teams, when was the moment that you knew you made it?
What's really funny is I always tell people I kind of snuck into the national team gym. Um, so my first time in the gym was during my senior year at Stanford. After we were done with our fall season, they often have kind of a winter training block for current college players, or at the time it was like seniors who were done with their eligibility or were graduating. And now it's usually like a week or so. That this one was long. It was, I don't know, like 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. And I didn't want to leave school because I had 2 degrees to finish, but it's a great opportunity. So they invited me to that. And so I ended up basically going to class Monday to Wednesday. And then I would fly down to Orange County and practice Thursday, Friday. Sometimes I could get there by like Wednesday afternoon, and doing that through the training block. So that was kind of my first time, but it wasn't really the national team. Like they were overseas. It was this kind of young group. And then I went overseas to play in Poland, and it was 2012, which was an Olympic year. And nobody really comes into the gym in an Olympic year. The roster's kind of set for the most part. But everybody comes back from overseas at different times, and Poland happened to end early. Hugh McCutcheon, who was coach at the time, he said I could come in for the beginning until people came back. And I was setting at the time professionally in Poland. And so I came back and I was setting a little bit. And then the setters came back, but the opposites weren't back yet. And so then sorry, before that, when I was still in Poland, I came back to play for the Pan Am Games, like a really young team. We sent to Pan Am Games. I was setting in Poland. I came back and played hitting opposite on the Pan Am team, or passing opposite, sorry. And first time I like passed or hit in like 6 months, but it was fine. And so that summer, Q lets me come in to set. And I think part of it was because I had been on that Pan Am team, so I had like a little bit of an in. Then I played opposite for a little bit, and then the opposites came back, and then I'd left for like a week or two, and then Hugh called me and said, "Hey, there's one of our outsides got hurt. Can you come back and play outside?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right." And then I played outside, and then they sent off a team to one of the tournaments, and they're like, "Can you also play a little bit of libero, like while you're here?" I was like, "Sure." And then I ended up just kind of staying the whole summer, and then they sent off the Olympic team, and then they sent the rest of us to Pan Am Cup, and I was like starting outside for Pan Am Cup, and we won a gold medal. And then the next year, it's 2013, which is, the start of a new quad. A bunch of new people are coming in the gym. They're all kind of on tryout periods. Arch took over as the head coach. And then I was just kind of there, and I didn't have to try out, and I was, like, considered kind of a veteran, even though I just sort of
That's
snuck my way
crazy.
in and kind of stayed there the whole summer before, and so I would never actually, I think, tried out for the national team, but yeah,
That's
it was such
awesome.
I mean, coming in that first year and, it was Logan Tom and Lindsey Berg and Heather Bound, and just, like, I think being in that space, and I don't know that there's a time that you're like, "Yeah, I belong here, I can," but I think just coming in there and being like, "Oh, I'm not getting cut." Like, the effort in the beginning is like, if you don't stand out in a bad way, then you're doing okay. So to get in there and get to play with those players, and then, obviously, like, the first time you get your USA jersey and that kinda stuff is amazing, but, yeah, I even look back at it now, I'm like, there's so many incredible players that don't get that opportunity or get to stay that long, and to get to stay in the national team gym for, 5 years or more was, is incredible.
It's amazing. And I do wanna get into the Pan Am Cup, but before then, given all the positions that you've played, what's your favorite? What's your least favorite?
Yeah, people used to ask me all the time, like, "What would you wanna be?" And my answer
Yeah.
was always, "I wanna play and I wanna win." And so the only times I was frustrated is if I was in a position that I didn't feel like I was contributing as much as I could somewhere else, like I was setting and we couldn't pass, and it's like, "Well, what am I doing here?" Like, there's no point in this. So I think I loved all of it. I didn't Some people think of me as a setter, which is funny because I don't know that I ever got to, like, fully explore that position. I set a 5-1 for, like, maybe a month and a half of my whole career, and it was the second part of my sophomore season, and we went to the Final Four. Like, I'm pretty sure I was the least experienced setter to ever set a Final Four. Um, but, like, to explore that more would have been fun. But if I had to do, like, one skill for the rest of my life, I'd probably just wanna play defense. I love playing defense.
I appreciated defense a lot more. I was always thrown into the middle. I was, like, the tallest on every team and stuck there. So, that's how little passing I got to do, but you gain appreciation over it over time.
Yes.
So I do wanna go back to the Pan Am Cup, and what was your favorite memory from, winning and going through that time in your life?
Yeah, I have a lot of great memories from the national team. That first Pan Am Cup, well, the first Pan Am games that I went to, like, very first tournament I went to for USA. Again, super young team. We weren't supposed to do very well, and then, like, people didn't really think we're gonna, like, make it out of pool play. And we were just, like, young and dumb and tried so hard and ended up making out of pool play and getting into the bronze medal match against Dominican Republic. And they were a good team. Betty De La Cruz, who's here in AU, that was my first time playing against her. She, like, at her peak, she was so good. And we go into the bronze medal match, and it was just a dogfight, like, just people pounding the ball at each other. Such a fun match. We ended up winning in 4. My favorite was the whole tournament. We were in Guadalajara, Mexico, and the whole tournament, like, our bench would kind of, like, start the USA chant, and we would just get booed. Everybody roots against the USA, first of all, and then everybody
Yeah.
in, like, the Americas, like, all the Spanish-speaking countries end up sticking together. So they just start booing, and that final match, we win, we're stoked, it's our first tournament, we get a medal, and, after every match, we cheer USA or whatever, and then applaud the crowd, presumably our fans. We didn't have any fans, but, like, still, you just show respect, whatever. And all of a sudden, we hear somewhere, you hear, like, USA, and this whole stadium starts chanting for us.
Oh
And
my
it was such
gosh.
an incredible, like, it just felt like this sign of, like, respect that I recognized how hard we had played and that it was just really great volleyball. So that was one of my favorite moments ever, in USA. Winning gold medals was amazing too. I got to some of those. My actual last tournament was the Pan American Games again, 5 years or 4 years later, in 2015. We won gold there for the first time in, like, 50 years in that tournament. So that was super fun too. But yeah, I always remember that first one when the crowd we finally got them over to our side, the very, very last moment.
Gives me chills.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. And you brought up playing internationally. Was that a difficult transition for you, or how did you feel about that adjustment at that time?
Yeah, it was hard. So yeah, 2 months after I graduated, I moved to Poland. I was there for a long, it was like a 8 months at least that I was there. And yeah, overseas volleyball it depends a lot on obviously where you are and your team and your team ownership and all of that. But it was a tough life. Like, you're moving countries every 6 months or so. You can't talk to a lot of the people. Like, the way I think about it is, I feel like people, when they hear, like, oh, you played, in Europe and stuff, they think about, like, their European vacations.
Right.
And I'm always like, yeah, it's more like, when you take, like, a vacation and at the very end of it, you're like, this was great, but, like, I'm ready to go home now.
Yeah.
And it's like that, but you have 6 more months of it, and you're just living there, like, with none of your people kind of around you. And So I was lucky that first year I had Tama Miyashiro, who I played with on the national team, and she's now coaching for Love in Salt Lake. She came out to play with me in Poland, so that was great to like have somebody. But yeah, it's a weird lifestyle. Like the coaches aren't always the best. I had some, some better experiences than others. My team in France with their ownership was really good, and they were good to us. But yeah, I think it's an incredible way to see the world, and I'm glad that I did it. And I got to learn a lot about just people and volleyball, and you get paid to play volleyball and like, see other countries. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of upsides to it, but it can be an isolating kind of life too.
Can you give an example of the differences of coaching, like you're saying? Because I've seen some videos of like certain things that players have been said to from their coaches overseas.
It depends on what kind of coaches you had here. The coaches I had, John and Karch, like very collaborative, really like appreciated you asking questions. Like that was not the case for most of my coaches overseas. They're like, do what you're told when I tell you to, which is not how I operate best, particularly if I don't like agree with what you're saying. So I think that was hard. There's a lot of like casual kind of misogyny often in certain places too. I can remember this one time I had a coach who there was a drill, like he just like didn't explain the drill well. Um, so then nobody was doing it properly, and it was like the super fast, like we're just flying everywhere. And he's as he's throwing, he's just like, this is why like women shouldn't drive or something. Like, it was just like just straight up sexism. And I was like, sir, if one person is doing the drill wrong, that's on them. If everybody's doing the drill wrong, that's on you. So,
Yeah.
so
Oh
there's
my
some of that,
gosh. Yeah.
and then you're also missing a lot of the context because they're speaking a different language. So a lot of the time, so there's like my coaches in China, they would go off on a rant. That was the only place I had a translator, and she would turn to us after like the coach talked for like 30 seconds, and she'd turn and she'd be like, "Okay, defense," and we're like, "Cool, what about the defense?" And she'd be like, "Oh, back row defense," and you're like, "All right, great." So we're just gonna go play and tell us if we need to do anything.
Well, I hope for anybody listening to this is if you're complaining about your coach could be possibly could be worse.
Yeah, I wish we had better coaches everywhere, including the
Yeah.
US, and I wish we had kind of better training and everything for them. There were coaches that I could take, something from. There were some coaches I couldn't take anything from. It was just like, gonna
Yep.
get through this. But it was always nice to like get, at least I got to come back to the national team
Mhm.
um and that staff and those players. So it was a bit of a balance throughout the year at least.
So I do want to go back to your AU professional days. So you started the first year there. What was that feeling like being the first team to kind of kick this off?
Yeah, it was crazy. I really had kind of been told my whole life, like, professional volleyball isn't it can't really work in the US, like, there's no market for it. People aren't gonna wanna watch, um, every couple of years, somebody would be like, "Oh, yeah, there's a new pro league starting," and it was, "We're gonna pay you $50 to, like, show up at nationals," or something, and, so I was really skeptical, and I had retired, I wasn't even, playing at the time, and Jordan Larson called me and said, "Hey, there's this new pro league," and she was a much more credible source than most of the people, and she was going to play in it. And so I got in a presentation with our CEO, John Patrick, and listened to kind of his thoughts about the business model. And it felt different enough that, it could work. I feel like people forget now as pro volleyball is kind of, exploding. I feel like it seems like a given that of course we should have it, but at the time it really wasn't. So this type of model felt more doable, I think. And so I joined in, and I got to be on our player executive committee, which is a group of kind of 5 players that are sort of the leadership of the league and are really involved in everything that the league does, all the decisions that are made. And so it really got to be a part of the process of helping kind of design and build it. And then getting to the actual season, I just remember looking around and being like, but nobody told us like we could have this. When you think about kind of pro volleyball in the US before that, it was like, all right, we're gonna, again, put you in like some high school gym with like a one camera stream. And that's a whole different thing than if you have like a full production and you really kind of invest in the quality of the product beyond just the players. The players have always been talented,
Mhm.
and fun to watch. And like that's never actually been the question, which I think I was kind of taught that it was. It was like, oh, like volleyball's just, like the American market isn't just going to be into it. And it wasn't until we came here and I was like, wait, like the court looks amazing. The broadcast is great. Like we have, real kind of talent behind the scenes, and investment behind the scenes so that the quality of everything else matches the quality of the product for the first time. And I was like, this is different. Like that's something
Mhm.
that you can build off of. So to get to see that kind of all come to life and in that moment, and to have, Jordan Larson there and Shayla Castro and Betty De La Cruz, these, incredible players that we ended up getting from around the world, like real legends. That like having grown up in volleyball and being, told we couldn't have that, to see it kind of come to life was pretty amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah. I know. And that's what the sport deserves too, is that quality. People really care about it, especially at college volleyball. And I just think it's really cool to see that it's headed in the direction that it deserves and that people are passionate about, and they just need avenues such as AU to be able to watch or be a part of. And then you had the decision to move from being a player to now director. What sparked that?
Yeah, so we finished our second season, and I thought I might play one more. And then this role was kind of going from part-time to full-time, and opening up in that process. And our CEO was the first to ask me, like, do you think you want to do this? And kind of similar to the conversation with John at Stanford, I was like, I don't know. I honestly didn't plan on working in volleyball. I thought I was going to go off and do other things. And then what I recognized after that second season was like, this is a really important moment in the sport, and that we can really kind of drive forward and change it. And I was like, if we're gonna do that, I think that I'm well positioned to help kind of as we lead it forward. I don't even think I could have anticipated the sort of explosion that it's had at the pro level and everything that's gone on in the last few years since then. But it really felt like the time that we could make something interesting happen. And I love the organization as a whole. It kind of aligns with everything that I am and care about, and I love our leadership. So I think it was those two things that kind of propelled me. And honestly, I was angry that it wasn't bigger already. I was like,
Yeah.
and I'd gone through, my whole life being like, oh, you can't have this. And I was like, actually, I think we can. And it's actually really messed up that we don't. Like, it should be huge. Like, this should be the, what basketball is now, or, what soccer is. And there's a lot of like sexist reasons behind that, like historically, that I think have led us to this point. So yeah, I was angry and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to do something about it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's people like you who do drive that change. I was talking with Ellen Dempsey the other week. She's the executive director of the Side Out Foundation now. And she was just telling me, even she played at Michigan State right when like Title IX passed, when we're able to play sports. And I think it's just incredible to think about that there was even a time where that wasn't an option. And then now, the trajectory that things are headed as well. It's really amazing to see. And, I just want to say I appreciate people like you who are helping drive that change, because it's important for all the little girls growing up as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Do you want to take a few minutes to highlight the nonprofit using sports for empathy, equity, and empowerment, and you being the DEI committee chair? If you want to share about your passion and what drives you to be a part of those.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, some of the experiences that I've had, in volleyball, but then also kind of outside of it as I've grown up, is just understanding like the world doesn't have the same opportunities for everybody. And, I mean, even what we've just been talking about in like the course of women's sports and where volleyball's at and that, like as you lift kind of the veil on what happens in the world and why certain people have the opportunities they have, you figure out that it's built on a lot of historical foundations and also a lot of just like assumptions that we make about ourselves and about other people and our place in the world. And so that's kind of how Path, the nonprofit I started, was born, was the combination of sort of that idea and the recognition that, like, kind of going back to what we were talking about in coaching in sports, like we all say that sports teach life skills. Rarely are we like explicit about it. We just kind of think it's like happens by osmosis. And given like how I think poor we are as like humans at like interacting with each other as adults and, empathetically, I think it's clearly not working well enough. So Path was really an attempt to go to the top, athletes and coaches out there who people, respect and look up to, and talk to them about, what are the real life skills they've learned, the kind of human skills they've learned through sport or that have helped them in sport, so that coaches and teachers who are working with kids can use that content and introduce those concepts to kids in a way that they can practice in the same way that they're practicing hitting a ball. So we have a whole kind of content library on our website on pathsports.org that is free for, educators and coaches to use. And it's been cool to see kind of how teams use it to start conversations. Or like there was a teacher in Hawaii who was using it in her like poetry lesson. It's like they watched a video and then they like wrote poems about kind of themselves and their identity. And so I think that that was sort of the genesis of that. And then I think in the volleyball world too, obviously it's wealthier and wider than would be otherwise if everybody had access. And I think for people like us who like love the sport, imagining like someone not having access for those kinds of reasons is fairly ridiculous. So as much as we
Yeah.
can kind of broaden that and let everybody play. Like, I know I've gained so much from volleyball. It's like, how do we not try to open that up to everybody possible?
Thank you for sharing that and for all you do for it. I really appreciate it. Have you ever gone through any extreme setbacks or injuries or anything that you can share with us? And how did you manage, handling those?
Yeah, my like biggest kind of challenge actually started before I even started playing volleyball. I was 9 and I just kind of woke up one morning and couldn't walk. Like my leg hurt really bad. It's, so it's a much kind of longer story, but essentially there's something wrong with like my nerves that and it ended up being this kind of long-term chronic pain condition that like persists to this day. And I couldn't walk for a while. The doctors thought I wasn't going to walk again because they just
Wow.
couldn't figure out how to fix it. And then I was a stubborn child and was like, "No, I'm gonna do it." And ended up kind of figuring out how to walk, going back to physical therapy, um, and obviously getting to the point where I could walk and play volleyball, but didn't actually fix the pain problem. So that was kind of a consistent challenge throughout my career and got worse obviously as I got to higher and higher levels. And the thing for me was, I mean, A, understanding like the difference between causing pain and causing further injury. Like it wasn't that I was gonna structurally make anything worse. If you're, in danger of like tearing your meniscus, it's like, please stop. Like, don't play through that. But understanding kind of what I was able to play through and what I wanted to. And so that, especially when I was at Stanford, I think was a constant like me figuring out kind of where the limits were of what I could do and really having to make choices about like, I can be in like a little bit less pain or I can be the best athlete that I'm going to be and I can't do both. And
Mhm.
so having to like be really conscious about that and check in with myself periodically and be like, okay, where am I at? Where am I at in my career? Where am I at like pain wise? And am I good with that? Like, am I good with still making the decision to go for it, even though I know it's going to hurt a lot? And the answer ended up being yes, always. And it's not necessarily going to be that for every person. Like that's what I needed to do, and like no regrets, even though some of it was really really hard. Um, but yeah, so that was definitely the biggest challenge for me, and there were times that like it really hurt, but I at the same time like really loved my whole career, and so I think like maintaining that sense of kind of gratitude and love for what I was doing, even if it wasn't perfect, was really important for me.
I give you so much credit, and your story is amazing with that. Would you go back and tell your 9-year-old self anything now with everything that you've accomplished since finding this out?
I think the most important thing, and like occasionally I'll talk to parents or kids, who are going through similar things or doctors. And it's like, it's not necessarily about the goal is like, I want to get better. Most people are like, I want to not hurt anymore. And that's not always the outcome that you're going for. Like, yeah, obviously I would love that, but that may or may not like be in the cards for me. And so it's less about, I want everything to be okay and more like I just want to be happy. And I think like if you're always kind of waiting for everything to be perfect, then you're just going to keep waiting and be disappointed as opposed to being able to accept that some things aren't and loving the rest of it anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. If you're speaking to a young player that has a dream of going and making a professional volleyball team, what would your advice be to them?
I think really a couple things, like really figure out what your style of play and what your contribution is. Everybody's different. And I think AU is a great example of that, even with the leaderboard. Like people rack up points in very different ways. They're obviously the big arm, like the big hitter is going to get a lot of, the notoriety and the credit. But I medaled at AU and it's partly because I just pass and play defense and yeah, I'm going to get some kills and I don't make errors. Like there are a lot of different ways to add value on the court and not everybody's going to do it the same way. Natalia Valentin Anderson is a great example of this. She's, a setter. She's medaled for us multiple times. She wins a ton. She digs every ball, and she's like 5'6". She's probably gonna be mad at that. Maybe she's 5'7". But like, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, and there are some things that like don't depend on athletic ability. You can get smarter about the game. If you study it, if you watch great players, if you think about kind of what you're doing on the court. So it's really looking at sort of what tools do you have and how can you maximize those.
Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. It was such an
Yeah,
honor to speak to you, and you're incredible. So
yeah, me
thank
too.
you.
This was great. Good luck with
Yeah.
this and the podcast and everything.
Thank you so much.